What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right. So, a couple things, a lot of things I want to say in this video, but let me get this out the way. Katie Hobbs, Katie Hobbs looks to be on her way to being the next governor of Arizona. Now, kudos to the state of Arizona for being very conservative in how they're counting the votes and making sure that whoever they announce as the winner, it's mathematically impossible for the other candidate to come back and win. Because there are some people that criticize Arizona for being called too soon for Joe Biden last time in 2020. So they're being very careful about that. I noticed the networks, MSNBC, CNN, Fox, they were very careful in how they called these states, with the exceptions being when a state was just a tremendous blowout from exit polling. But other than that, they were a lot more careful. So Kari Lake, shut the fuck up when you're complaining about election fraud and I think that it's a problem where Katie Hobbs, as Secretary of State, is also a candidate, and she's in charge of counting the votes, but she's a candidate. First of all, where was your dick suckers when Brian Kemp had the same capacity when he was running against Stacey Abrams, who I don't care for, but still, he was Secretary of State in 2018 of Georgia and a candidate in a very close election, and I didn't hear you part your dick suckers complain about that. So shut the fuck up. Take your loss if you lose and do what I think you're going to do, and that is probably get some gig on Fox News. You know what I'm saying? You probably have some gig on Fox News where you sit on that fucking desk, sit on that couch with your legs crossed, and some horny ass middle-aged white dudes be perving off of you. You're fine. Just shut up, okay? But anyway, the main person people are complaining about in the GOP is Donald Trump. I think with the exception of J.D. Vance beating Tim Ryan, virtually every other Trump-backed candidate lost. An election that was supposed to be a red wave was anything but that. And a lot of people attribute it to Trump. First of all, I said this before, you can't have all of these fringe candidates, these extreme right-wing candidates. Yeah, they're going to do very well in the primaries, but they're going to have a hard time attracting independents, swing voters, disaffected Democratic voters. They're going to have a hard time attracting those types of voters in the general election. They don't work. The candidates that work are those that run on the issues in the right wing. People like Larry Hogan of Maryland, who was term limited and couldn't run again. People like Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia. I told you last year that I thought Glenn Youngkin was going to win when he was down the polls double digits at one point to Terry McAuliffe, because he was running a really good fucking campaign. He was doing just enough to appeal to the Trump voters, but he was doing just enough to appeal to the Trump voters, but his campaign was not wicked or it was not negative. He was doing enough to appeal to a broader swath of voters, and that's why he was able to beat Terry McAuliffe. But Trump doesn't understand that, okay? And to be honest with you, the Republican base, I think, has shrunk under Trump. It shrunk. And that's why they have to gerrymander. That's why they have to put out all these crazy conspiracy theories, because you can only maximize the white vote but so much. This country's demographics is changing. It's not enough. It's not enough, especially in a national election. And now Trump has failed again, and this is the third time. Because remember, The 2018 midterms were a disaster for the Republicans. He lost re-election, the first president to run for re-election to lose since George H.W. Bush. Then, they lost again. Now, there's a new leader potentially emerging within the Republican Party, and that's Ron DeSantis, who echoes a lot of Trump's talking points and supports a lot of Trump's platform, but he comes in a more acceptable package, more politically correct, more polished package. Maybe a little bit more boring, but a lot more acceptable and also more dangerous because he's deceptive. But this is the reality. DeSantis is coming off of an election for re-election, which he blew away Charlie Crist. Blew him to smithereens. An election I think he was supposed to win by 5 or 6 points or something, 7 points. He won by 19 points, 59% to 40%. So he has a clear mandate from Floridians. He won Miami-Dade County, which hadn't voted Republican in 30 or 40 years. So this is a clear shift in the electorate in Florida, which probably mirrors to some degree, outside of California maybe, a shift in Latinos to the GOP. So you have a popular governor who just won re-election in the biggest landslide in that state for a governor's race since 1984, I think, when Bob Graham won 65% of the vote. How do I know that? I'm a fucking nerd. But anyway, Florida itself has 30 electoral college votes. Third in the electoral college behind only California's 54 and Texas is 40. Then DeSantis appeals to Latinos who are progressively becoming more GOP friendly. Which, if he battles Trump in the primaries, now I'm starting to think DeSantis could beat Trump in a primary campaign, one-on-one, if it's one-on-one mostly. Because I think in states like Florida, Texas, California Latinos tend to be more liberal, but the ones who are conservative will more than likely vote for DeSantis. Arizona, New Mexico, these are states that DeSantis are probably going to win big. Then up north, Trump is kind of weak in the Northeast. I don't know how that would play between DeSantis and Trump, but I definitely think it'll be a close battle. But I think DeSantis could probably beat him, in a primary if this present trend continues with more and more GOP leaders leaning away from Trump and going toward DeSantis. We'll have to wait and see about that. But this is what I really want to get to. What happens if Trump pulls a Theodore Roosevelt? And by a Theodore Roosevelt, I mean, what if he decides, if he's rejected by the GOP, to form a third party and run just as a spoiler? This happened before. Now, this isn't the type of thing that happens frequently, but it's happened before. And Trump can finance this. I think Trump would be able to finance a third party run. He's not going to spend his own money, but I think Trump still would have enough support to finance a third party run, right? Especially if he goes really negative and goes to the dark side and really appeal toward the far, far right. You know what I'm saying? Try to use DeSantis' ethnicity against him, saying he's not a real American. Shit like that, man. If he goes really, I could see him getting donations from some very seedy fucking people. But anyway, what if Trump did run third party, y'all? What would happen? I mean, I would think Joe Biden would win an electoral landslide. I think he would win in a landslide if that happened. It would be a crazy election where Joe Biden would win states like Nebraska and Kansas and the Dakotas by pluralities. Some of the states, Trump would come in second. It'd be a crazy election where Biden might win something like 40 states, and the other 8, split up between DeSantis and Trump. But it'd be crazy. It'd be a really weird fucking election. And I know the GOP would hate Trump for it, but he's just spiteful enough, just narcissistic enough to try to do something like that to prove a point. Now, Theodore Roosevelt in 1912, he did it because he felt as if though he were the rightful nominee. Because 1912 was the first year where we had primaries, right? Not in every 50 states. I think it was only like maybe 6 or 8 primaries or something. But Roosevelt kicked Taft's ass in those primaries. But back then, presidential candidates, most candidates were still picked by the party bosses. And they overwhelmingly, the party bosses supported at that time, President William Howard Taft. Taft had been Theodore Roosevelt's protege. Theodore Roosevelt had promised in 1904, after his landslide re-election, to not run for another term. Now, this is before the 22nd Amendment, which limited presidents to 2 terms. So, in theory, a president could serve more than 2 terms back then, but most presidents honored George Washington's precedent of only serving 2 terms. But Roosevelt always regretted promising to only run for 1 full term. In 1908, William Howard Taft followed Roosevelt as president, but over time, Roosevelt, who's growing more and more progressive in his policies and politics, despised Taft's excessively conservative administration, and he felt that Taft was too much of a party. I guess he was too much of a party hack, and that he made a mistake not running for president. So he ran against Taft in 1912, but he lost in the primary. At the nomination, in the convention, and then Taft and his disciples, they took on a religious fervor. I think, if I'm not mistaken, they went across the street into. I'm trying to remember the details. I know they went, all of his supporters and Roosevelt, they bolted the convention, went to another hall, and created a new party called the Progressive Party, nicknamed the Bull Moose Party, and nominated Roosevelt for president. And they were the most successful third party in American history. While they only won 88 electoral college votes, Roosevelt won 27% of the popular vote. Taft won only 23%. So it's the only time in the history of this country that a third party candidate came in second. But because of the split with the Republican vote, Woodrow Wilson won an electoral landslide, winning 435 electoral college votes and the presidency. So that's something that could happen. Could Donald Trump run in 2024 as an independent? But if he does, more or less, he's going to ruin the chances for the GOP to win, But anyway, that's just a possibility. I don't think it's going to happen. I think that if Trump lost, they would try to do everything they could to appease him, agree to pay off his legal fees, even though he broke his promise not to run, appease him in so many different ways. I think they would try to smooth everything out with Trump. But anyway, I just brought it up as a possibility. Tell me what you guys think.